We'll talk about the roads to mass adoption, how the industry and the telco industry, Vodafone, are approaching Web3 and what a blockchain ecosystem needs to get to mass adoption.
Nobody cares if it's a parachain, a side chain. They don't even care on the TPS. What they care on is that, okay, I can develop an app, a product, which is going to bring me revenues. My customers are going to be happy. It solves a problem. People see use in it. And that's how you're going to get mass adoption.
Hey, Sohail here. Thanks for tuning in. Real quick before we begin, if you enjoyed this episode, if you learned something, please consider to follow or subscribe or share this episode. That helps us out a lot. It helps us to reach more people and to spread quality education across the space about crypto and Web3. Also, if you're part of a crypto project or represent one and you would like to come on the show or do sponsoring, please get in touch with us. And lastly, everything we talk about today is for educational purposes and no financial advice. Enjoy the show. All right. Thank you for tuning into the TEACHMEDEFI podcast for another episode. This one's a really interesting one because, we'll dive into some stuff we usually don't dive into, but also we got two Davids on the show, which will be challenging. Let's see. We got David Hawig from the Web3 Foundation with us today, Director of Ecosystem for Polkadot. And we got David Palmer from the Vodafone Group with us, Chief Product Officer and co-founder of Pairpoint by Vodafone. Hi, guys. Thank you for coming on the show.
Nice to be here.
Hey. Nice to be here indeed.
Lovely. We just cleared it up, so we're going to go by David for David H. and by Dave for David Palmer. So we won't have that much confusion, I hope. And we'll talk about the roads to mass adoption. So specifically, I would say how the industry and the telco industry, Vodafone, are approaching Web3 and what a blockchain ecosystem needs to get to mass adoption. But before we get into all that, perhaps you can just give like a little intro about yourselves and what you do. Perhaps we start with you, Dave, and then we go with David.
Sure. So I have been involved in crypto, Web3, blockchain, whatever the correct usage is now, for many years. So I think maybe you could trace my usage back down to sort of 2013, 14. Took a big interest in Ethereum, and then from there started to look at how this technology I was so excited about could be applied in the industry I was working in, which was Vodafone and telecommunications. And around about 2017, 18, I started to do Google searches, blockchain and telco. And we were only 4 returns, right? So, and these were largely, I won't name the telcos, but there were 4 telcos where there were some pilots going on. One of them had started to look at running some incubators in the US for this. And that was it. And so then I took it upon myself to really start looking at use cases where blockchain could apply to telecommunications, and really push that through. So there was a few of us who formed a sort of society, and we really started to push the case for blockchain in telcos. The culmination of that was the founding of Vodafone's first Web3 platform, Pairpoint. On top of that, I'm also an international speaker on Web3 and blockchain. Most recently, I've written a book called The Business of the Metaverse, a guide to the use of Web3 and AI, for enterprises and businesses. I'm still going, right? I think this is an exciting space. My day job is being the chief product officer of Pairpoint, which is this Web3 platform owned by Vodafone and Sumitomo Corporation.
Awesome. David, what about you?
Basically, I had my own startup, or had various startups before I joined the space. And my last one was healthcare focused, pretty successful. But as it turns out, most of the things we did were proof of concept, and it's really hard to get anything more than just something nice to show for companies. And at the same time, to be honest, we discovered it's a lot easier to get money from blockchain foundations and involved in this space. So I shifted more and more to this space, and we got some major grants from various foundations. And at some point, I basically said I want to fully focus on it, and decided to join Web3 Foundation early on as grants lead. And now I'm involved more than just grants, staking, and also all ecosystem focused initiatives.
I'd say me and probably also most of the viewers know a little about Polkadot and Web3 Foundation already. So what I'd be interested to hear is, Dave, what do you do at Pairpoint? What does Pairpoint do? Just like hearing about Vodafone and something is going on with Web3 that Vodafone is doing, I think would be interesting to people now. And I'm curious, what do you guys do there?
So Pairpoint, so one of the, as I mentioned, since 2018, I was pushing or helping Vodafone to explore, blockchain for telecommunications, and we looked at a number of use cases that we would take to MVP. One of them was IoT, and basically, when we started looking at this, it was about how blockchain, at its most native raw form, could provide the trust needed between two devices. How it could support, with that trust, the automation with smart contracts for two devices that, for example, a car and an EV charger, to basically trust each other. Once that trust is there, to then use a smart contract so they could transact with each other, all securely over the chain. And with IoT, there's also the issue of microtransactions, right? So how essentially those transactions, where it's a byte of data or it's a little sort of value transaction, could be done economically, right? Which is something needed for IoT, which is high volume, low value transactions. So Pairpoint essentially is what we call an economy of things platform, right? So utilizing the SIM card, and I did an interview on how the SIM card can essentially be used to power wallets. You're essentially using some capability that's already in the SIM, which is a hardware secure module or secure element. You're using an applet that can provide multiple private public key pairs. And you're essentially then using those two hardware components in the SIM to power wallets, right? So that essentially the SIM can be used to sign transactions. And if you have a device with that SIM, it can also sign externally on some chains, right? So you've got external signing, and you've got all the hardware needed in the SIM card to do that. Now, why that's important is that we're increasingly moving into a world where in the next 5 to 7 years we're expecting 70 billion IoT devices to be in operation. We recently worked with STL on a study which found that 3 billion of those devices will be transacting by 2030. So this is, there's 8 billion people in the world. We're expecting 3 billion devices to be transacting, and these will be frequent transactions because they're microtransactions. So there's a whole new economy of devices that will be transacting autonomously. And essentially you say, okay, where does Web3 technology really come in? Well, what does it do? It provides dynamic trust. Why the adoption is slow in mainstream is that we can use biometrics, we can use other things to get trust, but devices don't have that. As we move into this autonomous world, where you've got autonomous vehicles, autonomous drones, and you've got this need for real-time authentication, the trust that blockchain, that dynamic trust that blockchain provides, comes into its own, right? And then the other thing is where you have smart contract automation. So if you have two devices and you've got to determine, a transaction or when to transact, etc., smart contracts comes in, oracles come in, and then it also links nicely with AI agents, right? So all of these things we're bringing together in Pairpoint under the economy of things platform, and the ambition is really to build on Vodafone's IoT footprint, which I think there's 175 million devices now on the Vodafone platform. We start with there, but we go beyond that to different telecommunications providers, different devices. to really start making an economy out of it. Why can a car not sell its data, right? Why do we have these silos with all of this information? 75% of the data in IoT is unused at the moment. Some of that data has a value real time, right? And if you take a look at it and we spin it on its head, biggest technology story of the last 18 months is generative AI, right? AI. Where's it getting its data from? If you have, in 5 to 7 years, 70 billion devices which are producing data, connecting those and selling that data to AI large language models is going to be a really big business, right? So essentially, Pairpoint is the Economy of Things platform, which is providing IoT devices with an interoperable, decentralized digital identity, allowing them to essentially use issued verifiable credentials for trust, linking them to smart contracts, linking them to payment rails, including token payments and traditional payment rails, and allowing this sort of dynamic transacting of services and data.
Awesome. All right. Interesting. Lots to unpack. Is a lot of this still like in case study phase, or are you already deployed on blockchains? You have smart contracts deployed. You mentioned decentralized identity.
So I mean, this is the thing, right? 2018, 2019, kind of 2020 were about POCs. Right? The beauty of what we've done by Vodafone was to actually make this live. So we launched the MVP. I think this is documented. And it's public knowledge. We started the MVP for this, which was an EV charging MVP in February 2021, and we've been live since. So we're live in supply chain, we're live in EV charging. We're working with a lot of the automotive manufacturers to embed this technology with the SIM card in cars, and we think that's just the beginning. There's a number of use cases where this can be replicated across the Internet of Things and industrial ecosystems, and it is live, in a big corporation. Now, what I will say, and this is probably important, is that the context of when we started was one where the maturity of public blockchains from a energy point of view, from a privacy point of view, where if you look at GDPR in the UK, we're not as mature as they are now. So, we started on a permission chain, right? I won't name the one, but we work across a number of permission chains, some of them EVM compatible, some not, because that was the way we could get started, right? And that's the way we could, keep our compliance and regulatory people happy. Since then, obviously, things have changed, and David, in Polkadot, I'm a big fan of Polkadot. I spoke at your conference last year. Things have moved, right? So now, yes, we're live on a permission chain, but we are now bridging that to public chains, right? So what I like about the evolution of public chains is that you now have this idea of having public, and public permission, right? And I do believe that the future of blockchain is public, and I do believe that side chains are also, part of the future, right? So in terms of the public chain aspect, yes, we do have the ability to have EVM compatible smart contracts that we have for certain industry use cases, which can be executed on a public chain. But I do believe that the future is public. Yeah. So I just live on permission. Moving to public.
Right, interesting. Well, speaking of permission chains connecting to a public chain, David, I mean, this is one of the things that Polkadot does, right? I mean, you can have actually a permission chain, parachain, and then it connects and settles to Polkadot and benefits from the shared security in the billions of dollars, right? So just like, what's your take on this? And I don't know if you guys talked before. Yeah.
We haven't actually talked before, but I think it's definitely right. So I'm aware of the situation that you if you want to be GDPR compliant, or because I mentioned the healthcare focus, HIPAA compliant, there's no way to do this on a public chain immediately. And something to be aware of is that even things like, so there's, on the one hand, there's this rule that you need to be able to delete data, which you cannot on a public chain, or if you can, then there's clearly something wrong. On the other hand, there's this rule about is this actually secure and so on. And this still needs tremendous work. It needs understanding from everyone. So that's in general something to be aware of. Also, things like zero knowledge proofs will be super helpful for this. You see it with all these roll-ups now coming out that basically they are kind of centralized chains, and kind of some of them copy basically the relay chain parachain model. But it's definitely one way, and there are certainly I think the variety of options that now is spinning up also will help these different use cases to actually to leverage finally the public chains. Also, maybe not in the full degree, but at least posting some proofs, some hashes on chain from time to time to increase the trust in their solutions.
Right. When you were just talking about this, Dave, I also thought about Mandala, which is a project on Polkadot. I believe they collaborate with in the Indonesian government, and I had one of the co-founders on recently, and he was telling me this as well, that they were working on permissioned subnets or whatever, which, for example, for the banks there, and but they would be sort of like connected to Polkadot in the end, and settle some extent of the data.
I think you can see this across the ecosystems as basically you have some computation that might be off-chain now, and you have some computation that happens on-chain, and there are now different ways to connect this and also connect it in a way where you only share the data that you actually need to share or things like this. So, but yeah, the overall issue here is that it's still complex. The technology is still evolving, and so it's hard to keep up even for people working in the ecosystem like myself, and even more for external parties and companies that want to join the ecosystem.
Right. David, you're the director of ecosystem, and speaking of enterprise adoption and all that right now, what do you think a blockchain ecosystem like Polkadot then needs to get to mass adoption? Why do you think Polkadot is well positioned for that? But also, what are the challenges, which you pointed to a bit?
Yeah, so we basically learned the lesson already. So we are coming from an ecosystem that had this relay chain, the different parachains. We had all this heterogeneous setup. We allowed everyone to do everything, basically. But this is how we learned it now. This is not something, at least the regular company wants. They want to have whatever they need for their use case, and they don't necessarily care about all these consensus algorithms, the messaging, and so on. So we basically now try to simplify this while keeping all the complexity more on the back. But people, whoever wants, can still do it, but it should be easier for the regular developer to leverage this technology.
Do you agree from Vodafone's perspective, Dave? Is that something that does that echo what Vodafone is looking for, sort of?
Yeah, I mean, well, change agents like myself in big enterprises, face a big challenge, right? Especially with any innovative technology, in that the popularity, and you can check this out with others as well who work in big enterprises, but the popularity of and the ability for people to listen to you with blockchain goes with crypto prices. Crypto prices go up, bull market, people want to know more. It goes down, then you were wrong all along. But I think the key thing is that we're now starting to get some clarity of the architecture of this new digital infrastructure of which Web3 and blockchain is part of, right? Let's be clear on that. Yeah, so part of this digital infrastructure, will have, for sure, blockchain, right? It will have blockchain. Blockchain brings the trust to this digital infrastructure. It will for sure have connectivity. Nothing works, no AI bots, Nothing works without connectivity, right? So the telcos have a role. It will have finances, right? Both Web3 finance and traditional finance. It will have AI, right? It's going to have storage and cloud. This is a new digital infrastructure, which is the new digital version of utilities, which is important, right? So that's it. On top of that infrastructure, you have an operating system. I argue in my book that operating system, could be the metaverse, right? The metaverse may not just be VR, etc., but it could be the thing that pulls all of these technologies, Web3, AR, VR, AI, etc., together. But the key thing is that it's in the form of applications, right? Businesses and people, see value in applications, right? Why is Uber so popular? Not because of the technology behind it, because it makes my life easier to get from A to B. Why is Airbnb easy, right? Because it makes my life easier to find somewhere to stand. So the value, the businesses see value in use cases and they see value in applications. And I think that's what David was basically getting at there, which is, nobody cares about the consensus algorithm. Nobody cares if it's a parachain, a side chain, a permissioned. They don't even care on the TPS, right? What they care on is that, okay, I can develop an app, a product, a solution, a use case, which is going to bring me revenues. My customers are going to be happy. It solves a problem. People see use in it, and that's how you're going to get mass adoption. And this is, I think, what needs to be the focus. But there's one thing that I think is really important for adoption, which is that it can't be alone. Right? One of the problems that we've had in Web3 is it's a sort of build it and they will come perspective, both in terms of the use cases, the finances, and also the UX, right, and the CX. Come to me, use my wallet, use my thing. You can do it on my chain. What we're starting to see at the layer one now is convergence, right? Convergence, because what will happen? You'll go to Polkadot for some reason, you go to Ethereum for some reason, you go for Avalanche for some reason, you go to Solana for some reason, right? So that Web3 layer one infrastructure is starting to find roles and responsibilities, and there will be some consolidation. Then you start to look beyond the layer ones to how you actually use it, right? Things like account abstraction, etc., are now saying, okay, look, you can go beyond my address on my chain, and you can actually interoperate across chains, and you can even interoperate with traditional finance. Again, that's making it so that the application can allow one user who doesn't need to be able to go through countless procedures to move money from one wallet to another wallet, is now allowing us to have a seamless experience, right? And I believe that the adoption will come now with the applications, but also the development of more enablers like account abstraction, etc., which allows more interoperability, which, I think David will talk about, because I know Polkadot's all about that.
And something I just wanted to add is also that you have, on the one hand, you have different companies, basically. You have these big corporates that might have their own entity or section in the company fully focused on this, but you also have mid-sized companies that simply don't have the resources to look into various ecosystems and their options. They just want to do something and they want to do it quickly without putting huge development resources behind it and so on. So that's, for example, true for a lot of indie games and so on.
So kind of catering to all those needs in a swift fashion will be key.
Yeah, and in the end, they basically need to take a look at their own balance sheet, their income, and what are the risks, what are the benefits, and not necessarily is this the coolest technology out there or something like that.
Yeah, it might not be enough for a change agent to convince others of adopting it then, hey? Well, Dave, coming from a leading telecommunications company and advancing a Web3 strategy internally, how have you navigated sort of the broader industry's skepticism towards crypto, especially given concerns about scams, opportunists, meme coins, all that stuff? Sort of what strategies have you employed to promote a positive perception of this technology within your company? And do you see other companies in your sector following suit?
Well, I think the first myth to unravel is that blockchain isn't crypto. right? What is crypto? It's cryptographically secured tokens or money, right? It's cryptography. And that is used to secure a lot of the blockchain protocols. Of course, quantum's testing that now, and we're I'm sure Dave and the team are working on that in Polkadot. But that's the first thing, is that it's not crypto, right? And I think some of the realities we're going to have is how you move the mainstream finance into the blockchain economy, meaning things like tokenized deposits, which I've worked on a couple of pilots for that. Which is a really good thing of moving money from bank deposits into tokens and back, which will be super important for mass adoption. The other part of the making crypto more widespread or integrated with the mainstream economy is CBDCs. A lot of us don't like them. They don't need to necessarily be blockchain based, but the reality is that the bigger the crypto or blockchain economy becomes in terms of the main economy. I think now at the last thing it was nearly 3 trillion, right? 2.77 trillion, whatever it's moving every day. But that to extent could be between 2 to 3% of global GDP, right? So it's starting to get important. Now the importance of that is that policymakers, central banks around the world need to have a way of injecting or transcending macroeconomic policy to all parts of the economy, right? So if and part of that is through stable coins at the moment, but they can't control the supply, right? If you look at the economics, there's demand side and there's supply side. One of the things they can do is create money, and they can restrict money supply. So CBDCs, linked with tokenized deposits, are a way of getting these operators of the central banks and the retail banks, working in a coherent way across macroeconomic policy into the token economy. So I think that's important, and I think initiatives like that are important for enterprises because it means that they, that it's working with the mainstream. And in the short term, the mainstream isn't going anywhere, right? So the more we have convergence of the mainstream, I think the easier it is to convince on that side. The other side of it is, is to find use cases that make a lot of sense, right? When I was starting to look at this, a lot of it, and I started off like this: blockchain, got to change the world. TPS, this is the best protocol. You can tokenize everything, et cetera, et cetera. And the CTO of Vodafone at the time turned to me and said, this is great, but we don't talk about how great a database is. You talk about the business case, right? The business use. And that really impacted me. So one of the things we came up was business value, right? Solve a problem, help the business to realize an opportunity. And that's what we did at Pairpoint. The Pairpoint essentially is, the angle we took was, okay, you've got, these hundreds of million, over 100 million IoT devices, right? What about if we could enable them to transact? What's the revenue opportunity? Where does this position you for the future? What is the competitive advantage? So it was a real revenue, straightforward business case that we put forward. And that is how enterprises understand things, right? They've got to see the end. Yes, there is some interest in POCs and innovation, but at the end of the day, you've got to see with all these technologies where, the business angle, right? Is it something that can enhance my existing business? Can I get efficiency savings? Is this something that will allow me to move into a completely new business? Does it mitigate something? And these are the things we have. And all too often, since the ICO days to now, that kind of dialogue has not been part of it, right? It's been more, we can do this. This is a fantastic smart contract. But the business side hasn't come through. And again, the business is about convergence, right? What you've got to remember as well, and the reality of it is a lot of big enterprises, have forward spent 5 years on big ERP enterprise systems, right? And they're not going to replace them overnight. So, part of it is, can this fit with legacy? And I think a big advancement in Web3 and blockchain has been what we call trust as a service or blockchain as a service, where essentially you're starting to get the services and smart contracts available in APIs, which allow them to be mashed into bigger solutions, right? Where this is one, where blockchain is providing one function. And the other thing is, as we mentioned before, ensuring regulatory compliance, which means And in some cases regarding things like tokens and on-ramping, off-ramping, etc., that you stay clear of that until the regulatory position is clear, and we can't do anything about that. And the other side is just going for going for use cases that just add value, right? That are mature enough for the enterprise. So those are the sort of things that you have to navigate. And you got to remember, a lot of big businesses are very risk averse, right? So you're absolutely right. They want to deal with, one of the things our customers at Pairpoint say is that, we want to deal with companies that are going to be here in 10 years. So we're going to change our processes. We're going to invest. We're going to do things. How can we be sure that these companies are going to be around in a few years? So, getting big brands involved, certainly helps with enterprise adoption.
Right, gotcha. David, so what do you think from your point of view, how the crypto industry can combat its negative branding and reputation sometimes, especially given the prevalence of those things I mentioned, scams?
Yeah, there are different things to keep in mind.
Yeah.
So one thing, obviously, it's partly misunderstood. Like when I talk to someone and they say, hey, I use blockchain because of the privacy or something like this, that's obviously not the case. So, everyone, I encourage no one to steal something and use a public ledger to do the transaction, because you can theoretically track it in 10 years from now and so on. So there's misunderstanding when it comes to these solutions. Then there are other things where we basically, the technology itself is really new, lots of innovation happening, and this needs to become more stable. Like, that's something we are also now focused on. Like, we cannot update Polkadot every weekend. That's not something people want to keep up with. They don't want to update their wallets, especially companies. They don't want to constantly track these changes and so on. There needs to be more decentralization also. Like if the blockchain itself is controlled by a single entity in the end, or only one company that develops it, that's also not great, because then you trust this company and that this company doesn't go bankrupt. So there are a lot of things that need to be improved. We are working on it, but it's also not so easy always. It's like when you think, for example, one of the key things we are focused on right now is decentralization across different functions. You see this with the jam price, where we specifically say for the next iteration of Polkadot, we want to immediately have various implementers, have it decentralized, make sure it's stable, make sure nothing changes, and so on. But with this decentralization comes also additional coordination and so on. And that's something I think that is still evolving, but I'm super optimistic that we will get there, and that the benefits of this technology when it comes to leveraging network effects and so on will in the long run succeed. So if you look at a lot of monopoly situations right now, especially in the tech sector and so on, I think this can be broken up to a certain degree in the long run.
Right. And how does the Web3 Foundation approach sort of other industries, like, for example, partnerships, collaborations, onboarding of industry leaders into Web3 and Polkadot? What's sort of like the strategy, and any concrete examples you could share?
So in general, I think our biggest goal is to kind of get rid of ourselves. So basically, we want to help kickstart initiatives, teams in our ecosystem that take over these various roles. That's why we also have the DF, Decentralized Futures program, and we supported marketing, BD efforts, and so on. Because in the end, again, it shouldn't depend on us. It shouldn't be like Web3 Foundation is the organization that takes care of Polkadot or something like this. And if we are bankrupt or sued or whatever, Polkadot no longer exists. I think that's one of the biggest things we are focused on right now with all these decentralization efforts, like decentralized voices, decentralized futures, and soon decentralized nodes, where we also delegate our voting power and so on. And the other thing is that that we basically became more active again. So the foundation itself was really focused in the past on not making any regulatory, causing anything that might cause problems in the long run. Play it safe, better not announce anything, make sure we don't partner with anyone and so on. And that's also, I would say we changed this a little bit, also seeing how it currently plays out, and we ourselves become more involved again and try to do what's best for the network.
Right. Because I mean, yeah, decentralization and like you say, it makes sense in a lot of ways, but also it can make things complex. Like, let's say there's some sort of company that's considering Polkadot, but then they don't know who to contact, right? When
that's certainly something. I had a lot of conversations about this with. So right now we support all these BD initiatives that only get started, that are often small enterprises that focus on business development. They reach out to companies and so on. But in the end, they still should benefit from the brand Web3 Foundation. So basically, if they start talking to a major client and so on, they still can reach out to us, and we try to support this until they get actually to a level where they no longer need us.
Right. Yeah. Okay. And then the other thing is the technical implementation then as well, because you might need support on that front. And I suppose that then as well is the question, who would it be parity then with Polkadot that you could first point of contact?
Actually, so there is parity. Parity is still fully focused on the current version of Polkadot and maintains it, but there are also other teams like ClockDeep labs that we supported that basically helps teams that want to integrate into Polkadot and don't have the technical resources or need to develop any additional tools. And there are a ton of companies, to be honest, that work on four different ecosystems that are available and also have the technical resources to help with the development. So, yeah.
Got you. Okay. Another thing I wanted to talk about was, Dave, perhaps a question for you first, is like your take on who the real winners in the rise of Web3 will be. I'd like to frame this a bit historically in how the telco industry and web industry developed in the information age. When a new technology emerges, it can create like an infrastructure build out, right? So revenues increase, but eventually margins decrease as competition grows. There's an oversupply, no strong differentiation. And we kind of saw that with the telco industry and the internet age. So the real winner in the end was not the infrastructure layer, but the applications layer built on it, I would say. Apps like Facebook, Amazon, Google captured all the value. Some say the same thing could happen with AI. Chips and AI models could get commoditized, and the applications integrating them into existing strong distribution networks like Google and its ecosystem of apps would win. This remains to be seen, but circling back to the telco industry and its growth, Vodafone's market cap has fallen, I believe, from more than 200 billion in 2001 to now about 24 billion. It's almost like a 90% decrease. So how has this influenced how telcos think today, how to capture value, and is there a natural pressure now to be a part of new technologies as opposed to remaining on the sidelines or with the core business as incumbents sometimes do?
Yeah, so firstly, I mean, I can't speak to Vodafone's finances. I can give my personal opinion on it, but I think one thing you are seeing is, with Vodafone and other telcos, a move to become platform organization, right? So there's a saying, from telco to techco, from connectivity service provider to digital service provider. And all companies are now starting to become platform companies. They're starting to become as a service. They're starting to make their capabilities available via APIs, which can be embedded in applications. So I think that move has already started. And, I would expect that will start to produce some value. I think there's some other things that I've noticed, which is, some initiatives by the EU to basically say, look, this is infrastructure. And basically, some of the big tech need to, give something back, right? It can't all just be over the top. But from my point of view, one thing is clear is that, we are in one of the times which probably has, the most impactful technology changes that are occurring. Cloud means that, you're completely free from premises and files, right? You can be anywhere, anytime and get information. You've got AI, which is bringing new forms of intelligence and information to our fingertips, which when you combine this robotics and metaverse, actually can replace people, it can replace location, it can replace geography, it can remove geography. And then you have blockchain, which is providing a new form of digital ownership, is providing new forms of dynamic trust, is providing new forms of automation via smart contracts, is providing new ways of doing things. And you pair that with new fast 5G, 5.5G, low latency connectivity, and you've got the ingredients to go way above the internet age and redefine the landscape of business, right? And there'll be winners and losers, right? What we saw with the internet age is that, yes, all of a sudden we had information, we had the ability to reach people, and the over the top businesses, that we mentioned, social media, these gig shared economy businesses, solve real problems, right? And they solve real friction. I think now the question is, who will be the winners with this new recipe or mix of technologies that we have now? And I think if we look at AI, there's two ways it can go, right? One is that if you look at cloud and AI and internet companies, etc., is that these big companies double down. They start having the AI processing capabilities. They pair that with the information capabilities of cloud, and there's no secret to guess who's going to be the winners. You're going to have a monopoly of a few big players who will become even more powerful. Well, the other way to look at it is that decentralization plays a role. It plays a role in security. It plays a role in how we invest in this. It plays a role in things like DeepIn could actually be critical for building out the AI infrastructure. It plays a role in the new dynamic gig shared economy, and it plays a role in how we own this stuff and how things like RWA and asset tokenization could play a big role in that. In summary, there's two ways it will go. One way, the winners will be the winners you have now. The other way is that decentralization could essentially level the playing field. It could expand the boundaries of opportunity and equality. And there are some real things here. When we move into the metaverse, which will happen, and we go to work in the metaverse, which we kind of do now on Zoom, but it's now a virtual location, and it's where we set up our businesses. It's where we go to university and college. It's where we get our medical help. It becomes a universal right, which means that, again, coming back to the policy side, you need to have a way of governments being able to redistribute income and make things available, right? So when that happens, having the ability of a decentralized structure supporting that would be something that's really important. And I think this is where Web3 really plays a role. And out of that will come opportunities where new protocols, new businesses, new applications will build on this and could be part of that new landscape. From a connectivity point of view and a telecommunications point of view, yeah, of course. I think one of the most powerful things that I've personally seen from Vodafone is that they backed this, right? In 2018, there were 4 POCs that were looked at to go to MVP, and one of them is one of the few Web3 platforms live in enterprise, which is live, right? With based on an ecosystem of 165 million devices, right? So I think that paints something for the future. I do believe you're going to start seeing more convergence between connectivity and digital identity. Right, and I think digital identity fits nicely onto that, where you're having KYC and AML, and you're having the security of that, especially with AI. You need to know, AIs need identity. You need to know who owns them. You need to be able to come back from a legal point of view. So I'm seeing that the infrastructure will expand beyond connectivity to include AI. I think that will inevitably lead to partnerships with some of the layer ones as well, which will be part of this new digital infrastructure. And on the application side, I think this API model of enablers will be what powers the new applications. And if these APIs are not just connecting, but you're charging for them, then maybe these are new revenue streams for all infrastructure providers, including the Web3 ones. So I
gotcha.
My view in summary is I believe that Web3 will lead to a landscape where you have more evenly distributed winners and a wider range of winners. But I do believe that it's an opportunity for telecommunication.
That's interesting to hear. Perhaps to tie into the question I just asked, David, what's your take sort of on the relationship or the telco industry's history and this infrastructure versus application layer relationship from Polkadot's perspective? I mean, because you could say Polkadot is infrastructure for other projects to deploy on. We speak of networks in both cases. One could argue there's a similar relationship there. So will the networks struggle to capture value like telcos perhaps did in the 90s and since, or is this different? Is there a direct value link with the DOT token perhaps? Just what's your take?
So first, I don't know. We're also not in regards to the DOT. That's basically, if I knew, I wouldn't be probably sitting here and working. But anyway, so in general, it's a good question, and the question I've been asking myself for a very long time. I think even 5 years ago or something like this, I had a similar conversation publicly with the founders behind NEAR.
Oh, yeah.
And one thing to be aware of is that users are lazy. So the end user, they just might use Google because they are using it every day and it works. And they might using their Facebook app and so on because it works and they don't want to switch. And they don't care even if another solution is a little bit better or something like this, because it's a lot of effort to learn something new, to get familiar with it. So there is always, no matter how decentralized the underlying technology is, you can generate income from this effect. Basically, if you are just used to MetaMask, you are probably going to continue to use MetaMask unless there's really something that convinces you to switch to something else. But it's different for other use cases like enterprises or so on. They might to look at these tiny benefits of, even if there are a lot of small transactions, and it saves them if they switch the underlying technology from one network to another, and they save this amount of transactions costs and so on. It adds up, and they might look into things. So yeah, I hope that at least to a certain degree it becomes more decentralized, and that you have now things like Spotify, App Store, and so on, where you're really depending on one single entity that creates this, is in control of this network effect, and that hopefully this will change, and the playing field becomes more even and even more competitive to a certain degree. That
I just wanted to interject on that, because there's one important thing we need to consider, right? Facebook, I think, has over 3 million concurrent users, 3 billion concurrent users, right? A population of 8 billion, 3 billion concurrent users. Apple, I think, had over 2 billion devices there. I don't know how many users. But the key point is that some of these over-the-top platforms that we've mentioned have huge ecosystems of users, right? And they control the user touch point. And some of them have not made revenues yet, but the whole business model is to make revenue from data, right? Now, the key thing is that Web3 disrupts that model. Web3 disrupts that model because essentially nobody owns that ecosystem, right? Nobody owns the customer. In fact, the self-sovereign models are moving control and power into the customer, which the users could actually own their data and they can grant permission for it. So it's a very, very different model. This sort of plays out as to who the winners and losers are, right? Because if you look at it and you say, okay, 3 billion users, then actually, that's a lot of power. And essentially, if you want to reach people quickly, then all the applications need to go through them. These big players who own the ecosystems, and they can then monetize off that, right? So that's the power shift. As you move to more decentralized, as David was explaining, then the power is with people, right? The choice is with them, and that allows things to be equaled up more. Now, I don't think we'll get to the decentralized model overnight. I think it will be a transition, and that may take many years. But ultimately, I believe that if we look at market information, which is improving with AI and general availability of information, if you look at the ability of AI agents in the future to make decisions on our behalf, so we can be lazy, David, but we have an agent who's doing all the work to say, okay, this is the best deal. You're going to get the best. You can sell your data for more here. Then I believe that you'll start to move to a position where you have more self-sovereign. You have more decentralization and you have more control. But at the moment, I can't see that happening in the immediate future. Maybe that's 2 steps forward.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I mean, guys, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing all this expertise. I think it was a valuable exchange between sort of industry and telco and a foundation in the crypto sphere. So hopefully we can keep this alive. We can stay in touch and perhaps meet not in the metaverse of Zoom or Riverside here, but in person soon at a conference.
For sure. Now let's come back next year, David.
Yeah. And then feel free to come to the Web3 Summit. So
Right. That's in Berlin, Dave.
Yeah, correct. In August in Berlin. Yeah. That's always a great place to meet different people, because it's not just one ecosystem. Basically, it's all of them. So yeah.
Yeah.
I think I spoke there last year, right? I spoke there last year.
There was no Web3 Summit for 4 years.
I could have been
blockchain
like Berlin.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I could have been blockchain Berlin.
Yeah. We can send you the information. We're bringing it back, I guess, right, David? Cypherpunk, old school. Lovely. Okay, cool, guys. Lovely to have you on anytime again. And stay in touch.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, guys.